Welcome, Coach Tony Stubblebine, on this podcast and interview series. Tony is the CEO of Coach Me. He's the founder of Better Humans, Better Marketing, and Better Programming on Medium. And he is one of the most humble person that I have met so far. Just an interesting question, and I'm not sure if you have counted this so far. Just a ballpark figure. How many lives have you impacted so far, positively?
Yeah, I didn't come here to be humble. Let's be clear about that. No, I think there's some things that I think it's important to be humble about, and we'll get into that. But your question is really core to me. Is I really do want to impact people's lives. That's the major driving force. And so if you say, like, I started my career as a programmer, and I think a lot of the things I built didn't really go anywhere, but I did write a book, and I think about 100,000 people bought that book. And that was my first taste of, like, hey, I taught something to a lot of different people, and it's very niche, but it, for those people, it was important. Mm-hmm. And, our habit tracker now has been downloaded, a few million times. So that's a few million people that have used us to build new habits. And then, at a much deeper level, the coaches that we work with go so much deeper with clients. So it's kind of like, what's the difference between someone who's building a habit of, flossing every day versus someone who has used a coach to start a new business and has, changed the, financial trajectory of their lives. I think that's pretty big. And so I think at this point we've worked with about 30,000 clients, like we've sold coaching to about 30,000 people. And then there's the publishing arm, where last year our articles were read 70 million times. So now, so I've thrown these numbers that are all at different, levels. Sometimes it's like tens of thousands, sometimes it's hundreds of thousands, sometimes it's millions, sometimes it's tens of millions. But along the way, it's not uncommon. Not everyone says this, but we get it regularly enough that someone will say, like, hey, you changed my life. Sometimes people will say, you saved my life. I keep, usually these people are in addiction recovery, and occasionally they'll hand me, their chip from AA. And I keep these on my desk. I have like 2 on my desk right now that, it's like, we helped them stay sober. And for them, they're saying we really did help save their life. So that's cool. That's good. Like, that makes me feel like, I'm not wasting my time here. And it's not just cool to do good. It's interesting. It's just rewarding work top to bottom. And I'm really happy that I ended up in this field, I guess.
So conservatively speaking, if we have to put a number, easily more than 100 million people so far. So
sounds good. I'm going to go with that. I mean, there's definitely a significant number of people. I mean, more than I ever thought more people than I ever thought I'd be able to reach in my life, for sure.
Because at any given point, and I can see, so whenever I give someone credit that, they changed my life a lot. Like, for example, in the last 6 months, I'll give that credit to you. Like, maybe not directly, but indirectly of what you're doing. Directly a lot, obviously, because we have had a couple of meetings, I remember. But apart from that, whatever you have started, be it Better Humans or be it the Coach.me platform. But at any given point, I believe, again, life is a multivariable equation. And at any given stage, there are multiple factors involved who may have influenced somebody's lives. But then again, it comes to, like, are you, again, making an impact, or are you doing what you can? And I really like that one quote or one example that you mentioned somewhere in one of our meetings, that you really believe that you are here to build vehicles for others' improvements. What are the words you used?
Yeah, I think that's true. This is uh, the I mean, this is my mom giving me humility and context. Is the first time someone gave us one of these, gave us their AA chip. I had spoken at a conference and I was on a panel, and usually after you speak, people will come up to you afterwards, and that's actually my favorite part because you're kind of disconnected speaking to an entire room, but then that room filters itself to the people that really want to talk to you directly. And so once the talk is done, then you get to talk to those people. And so there's one guy who was hanging back, who wanted everyone else to go first, and he was the guy who said, "Hey, for the last year, your app is what kept me alive. Like I use habits to maintain my sobriety, and I really want you to know and I mean, he said saved his life, and I was like, it back in that time, I was like, I just think I'm building something cool and interesting. I had never had that experience before. It's the first time someone really needed to get across to me that we had made an impact in their life. And so, and it gave me a chip as like the only thing he felt he could give, as a gift. And I remember I ran back to the office because it's not that I saved his life. There was a team of people, I mean, it's not even like, it's also, he did a lot of the work, and that's part of the one of the things that coaches really understand and clients don't always understand, which is that it's coactive, is what some
Yes.
coaches say. You need both people. The coach isn't going to walk in the door and change your life. Like the client actually does the vast majority of the work. The coach helps facilitate that change. But trust me, if any clients listen to this, it's not easy. They just make things possible for you, but you do a lot of the work. So really, he saved his own life, from my kind of perspective. But I run back to the office to give credit to everyone, and I'm like crying. Because it caught me off guard, and it was a really sweet thing to hear. So I'm crying, and I'm telling everyone, and it's like, it was a real high morale moment for all of us. And then I call my mom afterwards, and what she said is, and I told her like sort of both sides. It was like so powerful, but also I feel like he did a lot of the work. And she said, listen, it's not that you are like, you did something uniquely special. She said he needed a vehicle for change, and you provided a vehicle that worked, that was appealing to him, and that would get him from A to B. And I just always took that a lot further as I've worked in this space more and more, is that people are looking for different types of vehicles. And like, this is one of the problems in the self-improvement industry, is it's like someone comes out with like a new type of car and says all other cars are invalid. And it's like, people have preferences. And for the most part, all of these cars are functional vehicles. I think this is what's overhyped, is that self-improvement works for everyone. But what's underhyped is that if you follow a plan, it almost always works. It's sort of like, I say like most self-improvement kind of vehicles are going to work for about 10% of people. But for the people that choose that vehicle and go and drive it, there's probably about a 75% chance it'll work for you. So this creates all this confusion, right? And so this is maybe like what I'm getting at, is the humility of it, of like, I know when I build something that it's not going to solve problems for everyone in the world. But I want to get it to that 10% where like, this is the thing that can be really powerful for you. And that's why we've ended up with kind of, each coach is in a way their own vehicle, right? Like you all have your own specialty, you all have your own persona. And so when I put two coaches in front of someone, I don't know which coach they should choose, right? Like I think they're both, they both drive. But the client has got some peculiarities about them that are going to say, well, this person is really going to motivate me. This person speaks to me. And so that idea of like, tactically, what's my job? My job is to put vehicles out in the world to help more people drive from A to B, from where they are now to where they want to be.
Um,
We
um,
got real metaphorical there, huh?
yeah. And so I want to touch a little on what you mentioned, like obviously you're not here to be, portray like what's the word I used? Be humble. But again, you need humbleness somewhere. I totally understand. So what do you think? Where do you need humbleness and where do you like not need being humble?
Well, the core of coaching actually is a humility about knowledge, right? Like one of the big questions coaches kind of always have to answer at some level is coaching is not advising. Well, why is that?
Yes.
Right? Why is it that coaching is not advising? Well, it's because advising doesn't work as well as coaching. We wish advising worked. Like we wish that that we could just outsource the decisions to someone else. And like I constantly I'm wishing that someone else had the answer so that I could be put at ease. Like, oh, finally I have the right answer. But the problem is that the right answer is contextual to your situation.
Yeah.
So like if I'm looking for business advice, what worked for someone else's business is not necessarily going to work inside of my business. And then it's contextual to the person. Like the advice giver took a path that played to their strengths, but I need a path that's going to play to my strengths. And so if I get advice that is wrong for my business, it's really easy to give advice that's like, especially in like business advice, that's both wrong for the person's business and wrong for that person's strengths. And so this is why coaching has so much facilitation in it. It's like, I'm like glossing over what it even means to say like play to your strengths. Like the vast majority of advice is just not followed because the person who gets it just doesn't want to do it. Like they've got so much on their plate and like they don't really believe in it. They're not committed to it. So they just don't do it. Right. And so when we say like a coach facilitates a change, one of the most like in practice, one of the most valuable parts of that is that it's a change that the client is planning to follow through on. And without action, there's no results. Right. Yeah. And so like advising is what we wished worked and coaching is what actually works. And we have to have humility as coaches that despite being expert facilitators, we do have advice inside of us, right? Like we have a way we would do it. We have a way we've seen other people do it. And we have to just constantly be putting on this, cloak of humility of like, it's not my job to tell this person what to do. Even if I think I'm right, that's like that thinking is what gets you into trouble. It's like, I know the right answer. I know the right answer. And also it feels good to have the right answer. It's like, validate me. Like, I want to tell you something smart, validate me. And so like we literally train coaches with the replacement habit, right? You have to go into a coaching session with curiosity because curiosity is the replacement for like the judgment and the ego of like, of putting yourself into the situation. Like, let me demonstrate how smart I am.
I totally believe, like honesty works here as well, because a lot of times, so again, this comes contextually, like sometimes when the client doesn't have any answer what they need to do. So sometimes, like as a coach, you need to step up and say, like in my experience, I have tried this and this has worked for me, but it's just one experience that I have. So would you like to try this? Or do you have any other plans that you want to try?
Right. Yeah. Most good coaches have a preamble. That's what I said. What I think you're doing there is you have a preamble before you give advice, right? Mine's even more aggressive than yours. It's like, I've got an idea. I'm not sure if it's right. Part of me wants to share it with you. Would you be open to listening to it? And of course, you don't have to take it, right? Like that's my preamble, honestly. And then even when I give the advice, I say like, I'll really put it in context of where it's coming from. Like I tried this because these types of things tend to work with me, or I've seen someone else try this. But like that preamble is a big part of kind of the, nuts and bolts of coaching of, I mean, Gwen, who runs our support and is at CF, certified coach, she explained it to me that in traditional coach training, they tell coaches never give advice, ever, never, ever, ever. But
Yes.
it's like, it's almost like a necessary lie. She didn't call it a lie, but it's like a necessary lie, because the new coaches, the desire to give advice is so strong in them that they have to be like told it's a rule, never give it, or else it'll like just leak out. And it's once you become an experienced coach, then they let you in on, well, of course you can give advice. Like, you've coached 20 different people in this exact same situation. You're a wealth of knowledge, but now that you have the balance right, now you can come in with like, hey, like, I've had clients try it this way, and this way. Here's how it worked out. Does that help you at all? Right. And but for new coaches, it's just the impulse is overwhelmingly strong, and you have to really like, I mean, I am sort of hyperbolic sometimes, but I say like one of the main values of coach training is to indoctrinate a coach into the idea that they're not an advisor. And like, I hate to see people just call themselves a coach out of the blue if they haven't been through that indoctrination. They're not a coach, they're an advisor, almost guaranteed.
And so, this is getting really common with, getting with increasing internet in India specifically, where a lot of people have started coaching others without themselves getting coached, first of all, or getting any training or anything in coaching. Then again, I totally understand that you don't need certifications in coaching, but I believe it's kind of like, it's 100% requirement that you must have your own coach first. You must experience what coaching is.
It's kind of a weird profession, because you're right. It's like, you don't need a certification. It's not regulated. But on the other hand, it benefits from incredibly deep knowledge, right? That it's like, to be a professional coach is the same level of professional as a lawyer or a doctor. And I think, but no one lets you be a doctor on day one. And that's what like is really weird. And it's not bad that you can be a coach on day one. It's just sort of, is that, I mean, to be honest, so much of the value of coaching does come from basic things that, a piece of confidence that was instilled in me by my mentor is that he would always say to me and the other coaches that I was part of this coaching group in, he would say, the thing to remember is that the client that you're about to talk to probably has nobody in their life that actually listens to them, that like is truly there just to listen to them. And just that alone is very, very powerful. And so the kind of the experience of facilitating, reframing, sequencing, pacing, coaching, like, that's all very, very important. And yet you'll still get something really valuable from a new coach. And so I think that ends up actually mostly being confusing to the coaches who think, oh, well, I don't need training. And it's like, well, I think you should start right away, because you should start coaching as soon as you can, because the training will make more sense to you. But on the other hand, I absolutely don't think anyone should skip the training. The training is so important to being a great coach. And then kind of, if you want to make a living, the only way to make a living is to be a great coach, because so many of the business loops inside of coaching rely on testimonials, basically testimonials and referrals. Like individual coach lives off of testimonials and referrals. And if you're not coaching at the level that generates those, then you'll never have a business. And so, it just, I forget what the question was, but those were some things that I wanted to say.
No, make sure the train of thoughts actually connect. So one thing, I'll also share my experience, but what do you have seen most of the coaches, or what's the reason according to you why most of the coaches struggle with their coaching practice?
I mean, most coaches do. I think that's fair to say, right? That
Yeah.
um uh there, I mean, I ruminate all the time. I wonder why are these people failing? Why are these, failing?
Yeah.
I don't mean it in a like really judgy way. It's just like, if the goal is to have a business and you don't, then you failed to have a business, right? Like,
Yeah.
why doesn't it materialize for so many people? And I mean, it's tricky because it's also, you find that people come into coaching, 5% of their heart wants a business, and 95% of them are just curious, right? And so they walked away with
Yeah.
a new skill, and that's for them, that word failure is really kind of off, because
Yeah.
they've got another career. How did they fail? Like, they learned something and they had fun, right? But it's like, it's muddy because they won't know for sure until they find out how much
Hmm.
work is really required to build a business. So I almost rather just flip it and say, well, what's required to build a healthy business? And uh, you have to treat it like a business. And that's what we think in the Coach.me platform is, we do some training to help someone be a better coach. But for the
Yeah.
most part, we think our job in the coaching ecosystem is to help them run a coaching business.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, the mastermind group that I think you're in with Kendra is like, I sat in as a guest facilitator one week, and I was like, right, these are the coaches that are doing the work of a business. And so, I mean, you could go back to just the most basic stuff, like if you've ever seen um, like a video game or something about running a lemonade stand, right? It's just, you don't
Yeah.
just make lemonade, right? You put signs up around the neighborhood. You experiment with pricing.
Yeah.
Like, that's a business, and so the coach has to. I see too many coaches who do one side or the other, where they're either
Hmm.
just doing the marketing but not really paying attention to the skill of coaching, or they just do the skill of coaching and don't do the marketing. And so then, my focus then is much like, there's a lot of coach training out there. We do this very specialized habit coach training, but we're not like trying to reinvent the entire,
Yeah.
world of how to do the act of coaching. We spend much more time trying to get coaches to build their business. And I think then the thing is, there's too many sales channels available to you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
people mistake thinking they have to be active in all of them rather than do enough to get traction. The only thing that matters is traction in one sales channel. If you have traction in one channel, you're
Yeah.
good. You don't need like, should our business be on TikTok? I mean, it could be on TikTok. There's a sales channel on TikTok, but like, we have other sales channels, and like, we need to, that are still growing or still materializing or still trying to get traction. So that is uh
Yeah. So
I think that's kind of the other pieces. Yeah.
on the similar line of thought, because I wanted to, ask you about this. I really loved that one thought of yours, that marketing is your responsibility. And because I have had I don't know, maybe you have used a little different words than this, but I have had a career in digital marketing, and I totally see when I became a coach, I was like, 20% already using my previous skills. I already had enough, experience of
Yeah.
marketing and all that stuff. I had a pre-existing audience. So I see a lot of coaches, again, maybe just in my environment, but I have been connected to coaches overseas as well. So marketing is something, as you mentioned, like going through multiple sales channel or not maybe paying much attention to it. But then again, when we go through that mindset that marketing is a responsibility, it's really
Yeah.
empowering for me.
Yeah. Is it?
Uh,
Why do you think it's empowering for you?
So again, one of the things, if you see, I need to do marketing in order to build my coaching business
Yeah.
versus I want to do marketing because it's my responsibility.
Got it. It's interesting. You probably, I'm blanking
You,
on the phrase.
you have written it on
I
Medium
want to look it up.
somewhere. You have written it on Medium somewhere that again I might be using, I might
Moral
paraphrase.
obligation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the phrase.
I love that. I'm glad that resonated with you. This is like a perfect example of how like kind of self-improvement vehicles don't work for all people, but everyone kind of needs something different. And that article is definitely a coach's article. So
Yeah,
it's marketing is your moral obligation. And then I make the case to people who have useful products, which coaches have useful products, that if they don't do the marketing, a less useful product will end up in the consumer's hands. So if you have a good product, it's your moral responsibility to make sure that people use you instead of the lesser product. The reason I say it's a coach's article is because I'm trying to do a reframe, because a lot of people think sales and marketing is about immoral manipulation, right? It's like the used car salesman is trying to sell you a lemon and is using a bunch of psychological tricks to put you into a car that you don't want, to sell you something you don't want. And so we do a couple of different reframes for people who kind of tell themselves these stories about marketing as a way to
yeah,
justify not doing it. So marketing as your moral obligation is one, but I think often the more successful one is because like the reason that's not that successful, I think, is because a lot of people are already past that. Like they've just realized I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to make rent if I don't market, right? So they're like already convinced that they should. They're just
yeah,
afraid it's not going to work for them. And so we use this one from one of our coaches, Patrice Madison, we use all the time. We say sales is about sorting, not convincing. And, it's like if you go into a conversation with a potential client thinking your job is to convince them to hire you, you put all of this pressure on yourself to do things that aren't natural. If you think a coach is someone who is naturally of service, and now suddenly you're trying to make someone do your bidding, it's like, I'm going to make you hire me, right? Like that, again, is like kind of that misunderstanding about what sales and marketing is, because they only heard the most extreme awful cases of
yes,
it. So Patrice like has the opposite approach. He's like, there's 100 people in front of you, 7 of them like have a problem that you can solve, and you just need to talk to all 100 of them to find out which ones of them are in they have a problem you can solve. So when you're talking to someone and they have a problem, but it's not one that you solve, they're not saying no to your sales tactics. You're just saying, oh, they're in the no bucket. Oh, and this other person's in the yes bucket. But these 3 people in a row, they're in the no bucket too. No, 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 no. Just like constantly
yeah.
that's a no. And I don't know. I mean, I like I always hesitate to make like dating analogies, but this is like very like Tinder-esque, right?
Yeah,
Like if a person is not attracted to you, they like good, you sort them into the no, right? And it's not like, there's a whole world of dating, like really creepy dating advice that's
yeah.
about like I can point at any girl and make her like me. And it's like Tinder in a way is much healthier, because it just like it helps people get into that mindset of we're filtering.
Yeah.
It's a filtering exercise, at least at the beginning. And
So
sales is the same way. It's a
I
filtering
actually,
exercise.
if I could, like mention the. So recently, one of my friends was going to try Tinder, and so what I've seen from my experience is a lot of girls, especially in India, don't have their Tinder bio, or it's empty. It, but
Yeah.
still, because like normally, again, I need to generalize a little bit. Uh,
Yeah.
guys are a little desperate, so even when they don't have a bio, they'll still swipe based on their pictures, right?
Right.
So she did not have a bio, and this is something that I mentioned to her, that what, you just don't want to attract everyone, you also want to repulse who's not supposed to be your ideal match.
Right.
Because, and
Right.
I believe it's the kind of same
I mean,
it's same in coaching business. I remember Kendra saying that she kind of repulses everybody who does not look leadership as a privilege to serve others. And she
that's
would,
right. I mean,
yeah.
You're exactly right.
Okay, so
Um,
if we can just go on a tangent on this part, uh, what has been your personal experience in coaching? So I remember you mentioning that you were programmer before starting any of this coaching part. So how did a programmer became
right.
like an entrepreneur in this
A
coaching world?
coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's sort of, I think, first of all, I'm a behavior designer first before I was a coach.
Okay.
And I got into it because, again, this is like an unregulated field. And I thought I could build something useful, and people and the market said, like I got credentialed by the market. The market said, yeah, we like this. This is useful. Right. And the way I got into it is that I'd been a programmer kind of going from job to job to job. I kept wanting more impact. And I guess, some people are born with an innate sense of mission. And I think I was
Yeah.
just born more normal. Uh, I just wanted stability. I wanted to feel personally successful. And so, for me, it was, I was always kind of in this like achievement track, but that like get into the right high school that would get me into the right college that would get me a job. And so I was like very much like I need a job so that I have money. And then I had a job and I had money, and I just was like, maybe I was just like a little bit too curious, and I kept wondering, all right, they're paying me, but what is it that we're accomplishing here? And I just couldn't get a good answer to that. So I switched to a more interesting company, and then a more interesting company. And I just like always a little bit dissatisfied, where I felt like what's tricky in startups, which is where I ended up, is that you're in a portfolio world. I've never really heard people describe it this way, but you're in a
Mm-hmm.
portfolio world that makes sense to the investors. The investors invested in 30 companies, and 3 of them are going to be big successes, and therefore the investor is a success. Those other 27 companies, everyone wasted their time, right? And so I'm like, well, I'm here, I am like down in the trenches, and if I'm not careful, I could go my whole career like kind of in an economically rational world where the investors are making money, but nothing that I did mattered. And that
Yeah.
just freaked me out. And so I just started looking for, how can I have more control over doing work where every day I feel like I'm glad I came to work. This mattered today. I don't have to wait
Yeah.
on some theoretical outcome down the road. And that's where, through that self-reflection, I started to realize, well, the thing that I'm always curious about, like I've always been curious about everywhere in so many different angles, is I'm curious about people's limits. I'm curious about what are you, Dipanshu, what are you capable of? Like, here I met you as like a very young coach, the beginning of your career. And like, this is a lot of pressure to put on you, but like, I'm imagining, what are you going to be like in 15 years? Like I'm just, and it gets me really excited. And I imagine that for myself. Like if I really commit myself to something, what can I be in 5 years or 10 years? I'm just very curious about that. And that, it turns out, is like a big part of, I guess, my brand. Is I'm not out to fix anyone. Like I know that people are hurting, or people are ashamed, like, oh, I feel so bad that I'm fat, or I feel so bad that I procrastinate. Like, holy crap, the shame around procrastination is so intense. And I just like, I just feel like for the most part, we try to run a shame-free environment. Like, okay, I hear you that you're feeling shame, but I don't care. Like I am just coming at it from curiosity. Like, um, uh, on procrastination, it's like,
It's
I'm
actually
curious.
it's actually
Could you do
yeah,
less? Yeah.
it's actually the same in any kind of porn industry, be it productivity porn or be it hustle porn or be it
Yeah.
sexual
Yeah.
porn. that
Yeah,
the
sure.
the results that you're getting, or what you do after watching those porn or getting invested in that porn,
Yeah.
is not necessarily too bad, but it's a lot, like people feel ashamed of it. So
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
again,
Yeah,
porn, I'm sorry. So even
yeah,
even when we talk about the typical porn industry, uh, sometimes porn has proven to be beneficial, like it calms down your nerves and all that stuff medically.
sure.
Sometimes it has helped you.
Yeah.
Masturbation again is a healthy activity, but there's a lot of shame around it.
Yeah.
And likewise, when we talk
Oh,
about
yeah, for
productivity
sure.
porn, there's again, when you invest
Yeah.
too much being trying too hard on being productive and you procrastinate a little bit, there's a lot of shame around procrastinating.
Yeah. So for the most part, I try to like keep myself out of like the like sort of porn and sexual habits, because it's like it's too hard. That's a humility thing for me. Like it's too hard to navigate like all of the strong feelings people bring to it. But productivity porn is absolutely something I think that I can help people feel like. I mean, the self-help is like the self-help section in a bookstore is like you're embarrassed to go there, and it's like, but you're okay going to the crafting or needlepoint or auto mechanic, like any other hobby is okay, but this hobby of seeing what you're capable of is not okay somehow. I really like reject that. Like, yes, often we want to do something for really practical reasons. Like you're in pain, we want that pain to go away.
Yeah.
You're unable to meet your commitments, we want to help you meet those commitments. But we like never want it to just be, um, uh, you know, you suck and we can fix you. Like that's just not.
Yeah.
I just think that's such an awful way. And for I guess you're giving me a bunch of examples, but I feel like for me and my kind of age group, where we've really became aware of that was this idea of Cosmo magazine, of like body shaming was like kind of an idea that came from that magazine, where people are like, it's presenting this lifestyle that's unattainable, right? And so like in Better Humans, this is a discussion we had the other day where we publish a lot. I love when we publish something for a person who loves the gym and is curious. How low can they drop their body fat? How can they use fasting and like carb manipulation in order to really push the envelope of what their body is capable of? But I love that we have a publication that can say that. But then we
Yeah.
also publish Reagan Chastain, who like basically coined the term fat activist or fativist, who's this is her word. She's fat, very fat. And her thing is the world is just telling fat people the only thing that you should be doing right now is trying to lose weight. And she was just like, big middle finger, fuck you. Like I want to dance. I want to train for a marathon. You're preventing, like, kind of the narrative prevents fat people from being happy until they've lost weight. And she's like, it's the reverse. Like, first of all, being happy is often a precursor to losing weight. And also just being happy and fat is better than being what's actually going on for most people, which is miserable, ashamed, and fat. And so I love that we can kind of, when we can meet someone where they are and say, like, whatever it is that you're curious about achieving, like, we want to go on that ride with you. And so, I know she's such a great example to me, because I know people like look at her and just like, girl, get your shit together. You got to lose some weight. Right. And, but it's like, meanwhile, she's like one of the most successful people I know. Right. They're like, I don't have the time to train for an Ironman. I don't know, she ended up not making it, but it's like that she can take on these challenges and live a happy and, impactful life. She's impacted a lot of people. Is like, I see the world more that way. Right. And So yeah, I mean, that's where it goes back to the kind of the curiosity and being, how do we be both high performance and shame free? And
Yeah.
that we just have to let people choose their own goals,
And what I usually, write about, that we need to create our own balance in improvement and acceptance, and that's
Yeah,
exactly probably what you
right.
meant. So I have, to be honest, I've been there, feeling really ashamed and struggling with losing weight and being happy and all that stuff. I don't know. Anyway, I
Yeah.
probably don't want to go there. Here's something that here's something that I do want to talk about. So you have mentioned this sometime about your partner Sarah, and because
Mhm.
I talk around relationship, most of my audience is in their 20s, who is
Sure.
this millennial generation of struggling relationships. Uh,
Yeah.
so, what is your take on that? And I know that you have a kind of not fitting in a box kind of relationship. Is that what we can call it?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like certain things. I mean, let's like actually say, so I think there's a couple of things about a relationship that are important to know just for context when you're like looking
Yeah.
at my life. One, we intentionally don't have kids. So anyone that's taking productivity advice from me has to understand that we've gone through our lives with like two professional incomes and never the overhead of kids. So
Hmm.
like some of the stuff that I'm up to is just stuff that a parent would never have time for. And that's, I think there's a tendency to like really like compare yourself to someone. And if anyone's ever like
Yes.
comparing themselves to me, they have to understand like I'm on the easy level there, right? Or Sarah and I are on the easy level there. Um, it's relationships are tricky in that, I mean, I love listening to a good relationship coach, or there's a show I think you can get uh, um, through Amazon, I think, called Couples Therapy, and it was like
Mm-hmm.
a real therapist and a bunch of couples let themselves be filmed, and
Oh.
so just to like see that progression. And it's like, and then you're like pointing out things that you're like, oh, we have that pattern, we have that pattern, we have that pattern. um and it's like one pattern is sort of, you couples have different feelings about responsibility, and usually that ends up being money, like you're kind of
Hmm.
like how much risk, what pace, and you have to kind of work to balance that out. But then again, like Sarah and I are on easy street because we're both, have good earning potential, and we don't have a
Yeah.
lot of financial pressure on top of that. So like a lot of the conflict that would be in a relationship we didn't have because of that.
Yeah.
um uh I, but it's, I just have a suspicion, and this is one that like I think everyone should take with a grain of salt. But like
Okay.
this is my suspicion from watching other people, is that it just seems to me that the couples that work out, they work out because both of them want it to work out. And
Yes. Yeah.
I can't explain what even that means in practice, but it's like if both of you want it to work out, you'll do the work that's required to make it work out. And if only one of you wants it to work out, then it eventually that person will generate so much resentment that they'll give up. But if like both of you are like, hey, this is a problem and I want to solve it, I'm willing to do some work. Absolutely. I'm going to try to get you to do most of the work. But it, like, worst case scenario, I'll do it.
Yeah.
If both of you are in that mode, and so again, this is just like, I think these were the preconditions of the
Hmm.
relationship, is that Sarah and I met when we were, I guess I was 25, so young, and
Okay.
um, uh, and we've been together 16 years. We don't have kids. For all intents and purposes, like, we look married, but we're not. Like we own 2 properties together. We've owned 2 cars together, maybe more than that. No, I guess the 2 cars. We're on our second dog together. There's a lot of paperwork you can do to make it appear like you're married. Like I have power of attorney for legal things or we have
Mm-hmm.
that for each other. So like
Mm-hmm.
I can make medical decisions for her,
Okay.
and vice versa. We're on each other's wills. So in America, a lot of the legal things that would come with a marriage, like we just put that stuff in place.
Okay.
And but I think we're
So
16 years in. Yeah. And
yeah.
so it's amazing to me that we're still together, but I know that we worked hard to make that, but I also like, this is maybe one of those rare moments of humility. I know that our mindset was to both do that work. And we can't credit having that mindset to anything other than just luck. So we just came into it, being people that I think we're going to stay together, but with
So
a lot of
you're
work.
a lot of work, more work than you. So what's something that you always say? Uh, More work than
Oh,
you.
then you want, less than you fear.
Yeah.
More work than you want, less than you fear. I mean, it's like, it's a completely reasonable amount of work, but it's
Yes.
just a lot of it. And, I think a lot of people think success is impossible because they can't fathom that amount of work. And then a lot of other people are looking for some easy way, like what's the one trick I could give everyone that will lead to a rewarding relationship? And it's like, no, there's not one trick. There's
Yeah.
hours,
So
hours of
so
work.
as you mentioned, like you are not married. Do you plan to get married, or like what's your take on
Probably not.
like
What's my take on marriage?
pros and cons of getting married?
Um, First of all, I mean, this might generate a tangent, but and I don't even know if you know this, and this is why I didn't want to set the expectations for being humble. So I don't think I'm the world's most successful wedding minister. I've
Hmm.
done 6 weddings, no divorces, so I have 100% success rate, more than 50 years of combined marital bliss. I'm not even sure there's been an argument. Well, I don't know for sure. But there's no divorces. So just want to make that clear. If you want to get married and stay married, you want me as your wedding minister. So I love weddings. I love I just love the public display, the proclaimment of like, there's something about the ceremony that's actually very emotional and powerful. And I do actually think done well, it does bond people together. And I love being involved in, it's been a huge honor to be asked a couple of times. I did both of my sister's weddings, and one of my best friends from high school. It's only recently that basically strangers started asking me, and I was like, okay, let me do it.
Now it's public. You
But
can
it's
expect.
always a
It's going to be public. You
sorry.
can expect more. Ask requests.
But I finally think I figured out how to be good at it. Like it's a little bit, I have more of a system. The first time I did it, it was a lot more stressful, but now I know I have the parts of it more systematized. Um, so I love weddings, and I would encourage everyone to have one. I think just Sarah and I, for whatever reason, maybe I think because actually we're busy, that we're this bad combination of busy and particular. So it's
Yeah.
like, if we're going to have a wedding, well, first of all, that's its own trick because we're both particular in different ways. So it's like, if we're going to have a wedding, it's got to be great. But my version of great is not the same as her version of great. So it's just a lot of work to even like plan, like even agree, even to get to agreement would be a lot of work. And then, I mean, in America, the way we do weddings here is like, you drop the same amount of money that you put on a down payment on a house, and you spend almost
Hmm.
an entire year on it. So I can hardly think of a single year where Sarah and I weren't deeply involved in something extracurricular that would have made like planning a wedding, like for either of us, really difficult. And I think, so then what it really comes down to is like, it's not, neither of us are very motivated by these sort of societal milestones, right? Like, some people think, like that's what defines your life. It's like you graduate, you get married, you have a kid, you buy a house, like you get married in there, right? Like these are important milestones to signify that, hey, things are going all right for you, right?
Yeah.
And we just like kind of both people that choose our own path. And so of those, we did both graduate from college and did buy houses, but they were much more like on our own terms. And I think, it's like if you actually get to the core, this is why for us, we're not willing to like push through the barriers that would lead to getting married. And Sarah would tell you a slightly different or maybe completely different story, but I think, like
let's
usually
talk.
one
Let's
or
talk.
both people.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's talk about this only. When was the last time you had a discussion about this topic with Sarah?
In the last couple months, I'm sure. I mean, it's come up. In which, she says that she just doesn't like, it's offensive to her to have the government involved in her love life.
Okay. Sure.
So there you go. So that's her answer. But it's sort of like, if it was like some people, it's such an important milestone for them that, and I think if I was one of those people, or if she was one of those people, then we would be married. It's like, like I promised, if one of us had promised our parents that we would, have a great wedding, then I think we would probably have pushed through this resentment of government involvement in our lives,
Is it okay
that's
if
something that can be overcome.
Sure. Yeah. Is it okay if I ask one more question about this? So
sure.
Let's say you get married after a year and, like the life proceeded from there versus you don't get married. Yeah. So, like, is there something that you might be missing?
No, I mean, it's like literally getting married would do nothing for us other than like, I for a while I was trying to wear one of those Aura rings, those like that track your sleep and stuff. And it just really bothers me to have things on my fingers, like I can only think of things that would get worse for us if we were to get married. We'd actually pay more based on how the tax system works here. We're in a tax bracket that would pay more in taxes. I'd have all this pressure to wear a wedding band that probably would be super uncomfortable for me. Would have wasted kind of a year of wasted. You can see even how my mind works. It's like wasted a year of planning and a huge chunk of money, And I mean, this is one, like, I think Sarah and I are pretty good at figuring out what fits us. And I just have to be careful not to promoting our life to other people. I'm promoting choose a life that fits you. So other people should get married, and you should have me as your minister if you do get married, obviously. But you like, I'm not telling other people they shouldn't. I just, for us, it's not for.
It's actually so typical of coaches to do this kind of a thing. I do not do journaling a lot, but I have my clients do this because I know how powerful it is. I don't do it. But anyway, so another question on the same thoughts. Has it ever happened that any female clients or some customers or something like that came up to you and flirted with you, and if they asked you like, are you married, how do you respond?
Oh, I'm lucky, but this is actually something I often worry is not in our training. Coaching is really personal. Like, you have like a real connection with someone, and it's like, it's hard. It would be easy to misinterpret that. And it does. It happens in therapy, and I'm sure it happens in coaching. So let me just tell you something you're probably going to think is a little bit gross, but it's like was really valuable to me.
Okay.
When I was 14, my mom were looking for something to do to give back, like some community service to do. And what we settled on was volunteering for Special Olympics, which is this organization that does sports for handicapped people. And so for all of high school, basically, the two of us were coaches in the local Special Olympics basketball team. And it was a big group of people, like a big group of athletes and big group of coaches too. And that was a really good experience. But I remember new coach orientation day, the head of that chapter of Special Olympics said, like, point blank, all coaches have to be careful not to sleep with the athletes. You cannot have sex with the athletes. You're surprised that I'm telling you this, but these athletes are adults who have sexual urges, and they will flirt with you and they will come onto you. And it's just like, and for obvious reasons, you have to be prepared ahead of time. But here I am, 14 or whatever, being like, people sleep with, like handicapped people. What the hell, right? Because I hadn't even met the athletes, and I was thinking they're all going to be in wheelchairs or something, right? I mean, the whole thing was like so like jarring to me at that time. Like, it turns out, by the way, I don't know if they still use this terminology. I'm actually a little bit worried this is not like, might have become kind of offensive, but like our team had what they called high functioning and low functioning. So like low functioning was the stereotype, right, of someone that really appears handicapped. High functioning were people that were more athletic than I was, but they just, kind of something was going on in their head that, they weren't ever going to do complicated drills. We weren't ever going to teach them plays, but their skill set, they could a basket as good as I could. You could run fast, and you really see it. It's like physically they look the same as anyone you would meet on the street. So I just thought that was great indoctrination early on. I got that really early on. And then later I had this experience, this awkward social encounter where someone who is really into meditation and like had started like teaching other people meditation, like leading meditations, but was basically a newbie, waiting for like 6 months or something, right? I said, hey, why don't you come to my meditation? My office is like a wild startup perk, but my office was inside of Medium's office, and Medium was bringing in Will Kabat-Zinn, who is like a big name in meditation, and his dad is an even bigger name. Is Jonathan Kabat-Zinn is his dad. So this like the person who like sort of brought mindfulness to the Western market, and his son, then his son who like leads meditation retreats at the big meditation centers in the US, was just randomly teaching a meditation class inside of this startup. And I would go to it all the time and then talk to Will afterwards. And Will was my favorite people. And so I brought my friend thinking like, this will be a good experience to you. And my friend did the ballsiest thing. He said to Will, he's like, hey, I'm like really into this. I want to teach this. Like, if you're ever sick, could I fill in for you? And Will was like, just gave him this look of like, what the fuck are you thinking? Do you know how much training I've had? Like you just see it all on his face. Like, and this is like a very Zen guy, but he's like, dude, I spent like 10 years in a monastery. I've been teaching this for like 30, like my dad is Jonathan. And you think because you're excited about meditation that you can, and one of the things I like about Will is I've seen him get upset more than once. And one of the things is you see the meditation kick in where he'll just like reflexively, there'll be this pause and he'll self-reflect. And then he'll, it's like that pause that's what the this actually is. It's not that you don't have feelings, it's that you have different kind of ways of processing these feelings. And so, Will kindly told them, no fucking way. Like, zero chance, go away, right? And afterwards I apologized to Will. I was like, I didn't know that was going to happen. And he goes, and I said, Will, what do you think would have happened if he was if he was teaching a class, and zero hesitation, he said, oh, he would sleep with the students.
Oh.
And I was like so shocked that answer came so quickly, right? And this is, again, this goes back to the value of professional training is like, yeah, you think because you understand how to do one or two things well that you're ready. And the reality is that like you're not ready because you don't know how to avoid a bunch of pitfalls. And like this is why training is important. So I can tell you that it's not a big issue in our world. Like in all this volume of coaching, we get an enormous number of complaints about coaches. I mean, it's like I see all the complaints, So if we're doing this much, this much coaching, there's going to be that much complaints, and I'm going to see all of them. And to me, that will feel like a big. None of it is about like coaches overstepping their bounds, and I feel like very or coaches not understanding that boundary, right? It's a position of power, and even if you think the client is receptive, it's just completely unethically and morally wrong. No, it's never happened to me. I mean, I definitely have had the experience of like feeling really strong connections to people. And not so much in coaching, but in other self-improvement work where I was just like, this is where mindfulness helps. Like, it's okay to have the feeling, but you have to have the tools to be like, I'm having this feeling. I need to, I need to set it aside. I need to understand it and move on. Like, because there's not a feeling to act on. There's not a feeling to convince myself that it's okay, to move on. Or it's funny, like I think you were asking a romantic question, like something that would lead to sex or whatnot. But the story that I'm actually thinking about is now one of my best friends in coaching. We were both at Esalen, didn't know each other, and we did this exercise that was just about listening to each other. And at the end of it, I just was like, I love you. I was like, I just met you and I love you. And I'm like, I don't know what this is like. It was not, I'm not saying romantic love. I just like I don't know what to, I was just like, this is so freaking weird. And it's just, so then I was like, well, the thing there is then to build an actual friendship. It's not to throw myself at them and be best friends on day one. It's like, well, okay, there's a connection. Let's see where it goes. But that was one for me that was just like, the feeling was so so far and above the history together. You have this super strong feeling even though you shouldn't yet. And so those that's an experience thing. And I've often wondered if we should add more to our own training. I mean, I don't know, the habit coach certification's already so fundamentally packed. But this is definitely one of the boundary setting things about being a professional coach. What is flirting anyways, except listening to each other and staring into each other's eyes, right? That's going on. And you have to be in a different mindset always.
So actually,
that's my answer.
I totally resonate what you mentioned, and obviously because I have had a little bit of experience in it, and whatever you mentioned that about connection, that obviously you need to have connection, only then the other person is will be opening up. I totally resonate with that. And I have a question from Ananksha. So Ananksha Lamyan, she's a friend of ours, and she asked me to ask you this question, that how do you keep the spark alive when you live with your partner?
It's interesting. In all the interviews I've ever done, no one was really interested in my love life.
So it's not actually, the angle is not about your love life. It's about, like who you as a person,
Yeah.
as someone who has developed all this
Yeah.
productivity mindset tools, how you navigate through everything.
Yeah.
It's not, like it's not a creepy
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, it makes sense, right? And I'm so intentional about so much. Like, why wouldn't this be part of it
Yes.
too? Um, why wouldn't my relationship with Sarah? Uh, a word that comes up for me a lot of times with people is permission, and I think this is how we sort of navigated it in a relationship: is permission for the relationship not to be everything. Like.
Yeah.
We have the luxury of not needing it to be everything, right? Like, I don't, again, because we're not super reliant on each other. Like, we're very self-sufficient people. So in our path, um, instead of thinking like, this is my partner in all things, it's like, this is my partner, Sarah's my partner in the things, in a few things that fit, that overlap for us. So like, we love New York City. We love culture. We love certain friends. We love dogs. We love projects. Like, we loved renovating our apartment. We loved renovating a house we're working on right now. We love TV. We'll sometimes carve out a Saturday afternoon / evening and watch 3 seasons of television. And like, there's plenty there, right? I do not love modern dance. I like it. There's good modern dance here. We have a friend who's one of the top modern dancers in the world. Love to see her dance. At least I love to see her dance once a year, and support her. And I'm like very impressed with her. I don't want to go more than once a year though. And I usually go twice a year, maybe. Sarah could go once a month, right? And so the don't be all thing, you don't have to be all things to each other. It doesn't mean because I don't love modern dance that she can't love it, right? She just goes with other people. And same, Sarah likes a comfortable bed. Sarah, like, wants a good night's sleep is important to her and is more sensitive to the kind of the quality of the environment. So Sarah's not going to be backpacking with me, but I love backpacking. And so, I've been in the Grand Canyon before the pandemic. I going to the Tetons here in Montana in September. I got other friends to go backpacking with, and I'm not like, there's no part of me that resents Sarah for not caring about backpacking. She's not a mountain biker. We bought an RV. I love the road life. I think that she will, like, if I spend 30 days in the RV a year, I'd be happy. I bet she would spend 4 days in the RV. So we're just, we'll be separate. And we've always kind of had that, kind of a relationship that I think worked for, strong-minded, independent people.
And if I'm not wrong,
Yeah.
communication is probably one of the parts that's like really like a big prerequisite to having what you have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is something I remember before I met her and I was dating, I had a good friend who was 30, and she told me, she's like, oh, date. And my friend was single too. And she said, oh, dating in your 30s gets so much better because finally everyone can communicate. And what she really meant is like, people are just finally able to say, this is what I want out of a relationship, like out loud, say, this is what I want. And when you can say that, if the person is capable of giving it to you, then they actually give it to you, and you're not like passive aggressively hoping for it, or they won't give it to you, and you know that early on, and you move on, right? And in your 20s, it's like first of all, you don't know what you want yet. You don't have you don't have the stones to even ask for it, and and so it's just like a mess of bad communication. So yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of, it's funny to like even talk about communication. It's like, basically there's a lot of bad communication, which we then work hard to rectify, right? Like, it's not like you're a good communicator and so you always understand each other the first time. It's that you have a mindset of committing to do the work to get to the point where you understand each other, and you don't just like throw your hands up when you've misunderstood each other. I mean, we carry the baggage of our childhoods. We have different, just different ways of being and thinking, and different blind spots, and so we're always
Hmm.
misunderstanding each other, and working through that. But that goes back to, like, just foundationally, I think we basically trust each other to work,
Yeah.
and uh, I'm really grateful for her that she, I think, yeah, that, I just think that's an amazing foundation, that I wake up not worried,
Hmm.
um, because yeah, I think I just imagine, and I know a lot of people have relationships where there's a lot of anxiety about whether or not it will work. I wake up with frustration, but that's different, like, hey, this is broken and I need to fix it, but I'm never worried that we won't be able to.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was a lot of intimate details.
Yeah.
If we talk a little about your career, when did that shift happen? When you when you were employed, and then you made a decision of becoming self-employed? Was it like an overnight decision, or how was it?
um it's a really expensive decision. I didn't know it at the time, though. So I was um, the VP of engineering for a startup that was doing a podcast directory. The startup was called Odeo, and
Mhm.
Evan Williams was the CEO. I had a team of engineers working for me. One of those engineers was Jack Dorsey. So in the entrepreneurial startup world, Ev started Blogger, which at one time was like the 7th most popular website on the entire internet. Then he started Twitter, which also at one point was one of the top 10 most trafficked websites on the internet. Now he's running Medium. And then Jack Dorsey, Twitter was his idea, and Square was his company as well. And so these two mega successful people were on that team. But what we were doing at the time was failing left and right, and the team like really hated each other. I remember, like there's one guy I really wanted to have fired. I was just like, this guy is terrible for the culture. He's not getting his work done. He's not good at his job. And
Mhm.
so I went to that guy's boss and I said, can we don't need him. Like, can we just push this? Can we get rid of him? Like, no. And the other manager, he said, I'll fire that guy if you fire this other guy. And he pointed at one of the people on my team, who I was like, part of me was like, oh, I see your point. That guy has also a problem. Uh, but I hate the idea of trading, like favors around firing people is
Yeah.
so like horrific. If you see the video, I'm smiling because this is shockingly scary and bad, right? Like this idea of like trading, and I was just like, fire people on their merits, and I'm saying like this case of this person, they shouldn't be here, and let's talk about this other person. And so we just didn't get really, but like that's the kind of environment we're in. Or like I had one employee that made another employee cry, and then in the one-on-one, that employee was telling me how happy he was that he made, and but we didn't have enough direction to really say, like, change the team. It was like, give us direction, and then we will staff according to that direction. But without the
Mhm.
direction, it was hard to make those sorts of decisions. And so we just had this super toxic team. And what I tend to say about it is, I would work with any one person, except for that person I wanted to fire. I would work with any one person, but not any two people, because for the most part, if you pick two people there, they weren't getting along. But any one
Mhm.
person was nice enough on their own. And I was so burnt out on it. And I stayed, long enough that we had launched Twitter at that point, but it had like 200 users. And I helped them pick, like, here's the subset of the team here that should go along, and that will
Mm,
help you
got it.
build this product. But I was just like, I cannot be here. And I think at that point I was like, here's yet another example of, I did good enough work. but my work is not going to matter. Like this podcast directory, no one uses it and you're probably going to shut it down. Why was I so stressed out over the last 7 months? I've accomplished nothing. And, technically, I facilitated a situation where we experimented our way to Twitter and like played some role. Like Twitter would not exist. And Twitter would not exist without my management or someone doing management like what I did. It was just, they never would have gotten to the point of even running that experiment. So, I mean, there was impact, but from how I felt that day, I felt like there was none. And I think that was the moment where it just sort of like I just have to be in control. And that's when I started like kind of building things on my own. I wasn't clear with myself about mission. I just wanted to know, can I build stuff that people will use? And I knew nothing.
This
I
was
never
in
done sales.
2007. Yeah.
I'd never done marketing. I'd never done product design. All I'd ever done was like build things according to someone else's request. So it was a big learning curve. And I started a company that ended up making social network software. And then we found a clientele and conferences. So they were just like, they played the role of this like super social attendee directory. And we made a living doing it. But if I had just stayed at Twitter and been a middle manager, I think my stock options at the IPO would have been worth, I don't know, probably $20-40 million. That's a lot of money, right?
I can
That's why I say it was very expensive. Honestly, I had less than a year's salary saved away when Twitter IPO'd. So it's like I'm looking at my savings and then Twitter, and I'm just like, wow, like I'm nowhere near being able to retire. Like if I have to like hustle, or I won't be able to retire when I'm 70. Meanwhile, if I had just stayed and been this like middle manager,
that would have been.
But these are these things, like life works out. Yeah.
That would have been an easy thing to do, like staying where you are.
Yeah.
But would that be enjoyable and like would have made you happy?
No. Well, this is, one of the benefits of confirmation bias is like, we convince ourselves that what happened was right. And so what confirmation bias has like literally allowed me to truly believe, like at an emotional level, is that I'm a better person for not having stayed, that I'm a more complete person. It's like, I do feel that I would have been like frozen in time. Like if you gave the version of me that, millions of dollars, said you never have to work again, I'm not sure that I would have kept developing. And so, essentially I would have been, spoiled, overgrown teenager. It's like what I cared about was watching sports and playing video games and writing code. And I just hadn't developed much more beyond that. And I don't think that the Twitter experience would have really grown me. I think for the founders of Twitter, they grew a lot. But if you're just a middle manager inside of a hot company, it's really stressful. But I'm not sure that it transforms you the way that running your own business transformed me. And, then, like I was able to find a calling too. Like I really was able to finally get some congruence between what am I interested in, what has an impact in the world that I'm proud of, and also allows me, to be high enough in Maslow's hierarchy that I'm not worried about my own selfish goals. Like I don't need to own a yacht, but if I'm worried about paying rent, then I'm not the most generous person in the world, right? So it's like, it's like I'm comfortable enough that I can feel comfortable really being very mission driven and being very curious. I love my work, not just because of the impact, but also because it's interesting. And it took me a while to find that. I mean, I started this company when I did an experiment that turned into this company. I started working on that probably when I was 31. I'm 43 now. Is that right? I was 32, I think, when it like
Okay.
kind of the idea really crystallized for me, and it took a while to bring it all to fruition. But it was 32 when I like felt really like my life started coming together, and that wouldn't have happened. I would have been financially comfortable, but I think pretty lost still if I had stayed at Twitter. Yeah.
Got it. And okay, so here's a question that I wanted to ask you, like from myself, and maybe not that I would want to ask like this Dipanshu would want to ask you, but maybe a Dipanshu of 2 years earlier would want to ask you. Uh, so I know where I am right now and where I'm heading. Like for the next 3 to 5 years, I have a plan, like where I want to go, or this experimentation that I want to continue, being a life coach, having courses, group programs, so on, all that stuff. And I know it's going to take me 3 to 5 years. So a bare minimum of 3 to 5 years, I am in this profession. I don't know what happens after that, but at least till then, I'm in this profession.
Right.
But let's say somebody from India or Asia or other, like second or third world countries, they want to develop skill sets, or they know English quite okay, or they have one okay, skill set. Like let's say I had in content writing or digital marketing. I was not really world class marketer, but like good enough so that I can at least I can start something, like I can help some people in the marketing area and all that stuff. How could they maximize their, I don't know, maybe network, or what are their opportunities for them so that they could really grow in their career in terms of money as well as in terms of opportunities?
And this is, I think, where it's helpful. There's a disadvantage, which is that maybe your kind of in-person network is not that developed, right? And first of all, it's not just about being in India; it's your age, right? Like, we talk about like sales channels. It's like one of the channels that works for coaches is to become a business coach in your 30s or 40s after being successful in business. You know what I mean? It's like at that point you have ready clients, and then if you do a good job, those clients will turn into referrals. And a lot of times you keep your business job until you have enough clients, which is basically how Kendra did it, where it's like she was a CEO like for 5 years before before she really had unlimited referral business. So you're trying to manufacture something that like the reason it doesn't exist is because you haven't existed professionally long enough, right? But then you have this advantage, your economics are different, right? Like basically it creates all this free time for you, or like you have the option of having like productive non-coaching hours, right? Where it's like, when a new coach only has 3 clients, they're freaking out, right? But if you had $300-400 a month clients, I mean, I don't, not to speak directly to your financials, but like knowing some people's financials in India, it's like your rent and food is paid for, right? And so now you've got 10 hours a month of client work, including prep and review and the actual session. Well, now you could put a content business in place, or now you can be active. Like you can come to every one of my office hours, and you can do slower developing things, or because you have less financial pressure, and try to run your playbook while living in New York City. It's just not going to work. You're going to be flipping out. You would have a side business here. You would have a full-time job here just to make rent, So I think that's like kind of, I mean, this is business advice, right? It's like understand the systemic advantages and disadvantages and plot accordingly. And so, like you have the advantage of time in a way that other people don't have. And I think for the most part, like our community has allowed you to really thrive and excel, and that like a lot of people know who you are. And it's I think it's on us to make that more lucrative for you, or but I mean,
so I want to actually ask, like, let's talk in context of non-coaches people, like who are not coaches. Like, let's say who I was 3 years ago. I was a digital marketer, a content writer, and I was just growing. I had enough experience so I could write an average kind of a blog post, or I could optimize your profiles, or start some kind of content like for any business. At that point, so let's say someone is at that point where they're just starting out in their career. They're not coaches, but let's say they're in marketing or some other field. How could they maximize their opportunities?
But what is it they're trying to achieve? They're starting out in a career and they want to be successful in that career.
Because what I understand is, so if you're doing a job in India, a lot of average size jobs are usually like, let's say, I don't know, $300 a month. And they suck the life out of you. Like, you have to work 9 hours a day, and like 5 days or 6 days a week. Versus if you could just intern for someone abroad, you could earn $300 with so much less amount of work.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do you cross that barrier? That's like something I'm interested in knowing about your perspective. Like,
I kind of want to pass on this one. I feel like if I answered, I'd be guessing more than I'm comfortable with.
Okay, sure. Maybe I'll come in again with some detail around this question, and you will be more comfortable in answering that. Let's talk about another product that you have that I'm a really huge fan of, is your 12-month-long heavy mental training. I love it.
Yeah.
And it's just
I'm wearing a shirt that says heavy mental on it.
Yeah, so it says sleep is the best meditation, because sleep is the current module.
Yeah.
So, even before meeting you, even my courses were, like exact how you have done your heavy mental, like, delivering them some text-based introduction every day and giving them like a 5 or 10-minute kind of a job to do.
Yeah.
And so there are 13 modules, right? Meditation is one of them, sleep, stoicism, annual review is last, and then there is interstitial. What's that, journaling? I missed that.
There's too many to remember, but there's one big change, which is like New Year's resolution module.
Yes.
Set morning routine, set priorities, interstitial journaling, sleep, habit breaking. So basically, we guarantee every year that you create one new habit and you break one habit. Self-talk, stoicism, meditation. I just think of it as the checklist manifesto, but sort of personal operating manuals, and then annual review.
There's also
self-talk. It didn't count as I went, but I think that's self-talk is in there.
Yeah. So one thing I really love about it is it's only $20 a month, which is really affordable for anyone who wants to afford it. Like, even in third world countries, $20 is not a lot to pay based on the benefits they're going to get.
Right.
And I'm selling it because I have received the benefits of it. And then again, it's like kind of sponsored for me because I'm a coach at coach.me. So that's also a plus for it.
Yeah.
So tell me, if you had to,
Well, what's the question? First of all, I mean, I want to get you on tape. I mean, you could be the pitch person for it, but So I love that. Great. Check. I agree. Now what do we want? What do you have a question about it?
Yeah. So the question is, if we have to talk a little, because I want you to talk about it a little, because I had not seen you talking about it almost anywhere, because I have seen you marketing it like it seems like it's not on your
Very little.
priority list. That's what I've seen so far.
Yeah. I'm involved in a lot of different things, and they're sort of for different reasons. And
Yeah.
sometimes they, sometimes they have business goals that aren't obvious, right? Like, and heavy mental is one where I just felt like I couldn't build tools for coaches if I wasn't personally somewhat aware. I'm not a good, there's a lot of ways to be an entrepreneur. There's a lot of ways to build products.
Yeah.
But I'm not a great researcher. Like, I don't learn a lot by like interviewing people and then building something based on the interview. So much of my inspiration or insight comes from hands-on experience, which then I kind of have to mold through experience with customers. But if I'm not kind of hands-on, I find it's just really hard for me to be creative. So I got really scared that if I didn't have some hands-on kind of experience helping people change their lives, that I couldn't actually build tools for coaches. And so I like, the reason you don't see me overly promote heavy mental is because it's not the point of it is not to make the money. Like, it's not where, like, it's not the main profit center of, and in fact, we run this platform, a coaching platform, Coach Me, which does, bring in potential clients and then coaches. And so the coaching side of that platform, the profit center, which I love, is because it's a win-win. Like, we were really just kind of philosophically, we want to make money when the coach makes money. And so what's ended up happening is there's parts of the company where we just way undercharge, like so much less than anyone else would charge for this. Like, but then there's this one part of the company where we like charge a lot. Like, the coaching directory for coaches is a profit share. And it's like, it's a healthy profit share, because you know what? It's hard to get clients to a coach. And, but if you do it, it's a huge win-win, right? The coach is happy, the client's happy, we're happy. And so all of the profit in the company is in that. And because we're clear on that, I can do stuff like say, like, I want to train you as a coach at cost. I don't, like, so many other coaching businesses are based on the idea that I'm going to train you for like you're going to give me $5,000 or $12,000, and then I'm going to train you, but I'm not responsible for whether or not you got a return on investment, right? It just, and that always felt like a disconnect to me. I think a lot of these trainings are great, but for me, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me because I would spend the entire training anxious that, you weren't going to get your money's worth. Like, I could give the best training in the world, but if I can see you're not going to turn that into a business, like, I would just be like shaking. I'd be like, let me give you, like, I got to push you out of the class and give you your money back, because this is never going to work for you, and I just don't want to be in that position. And so we do these certifications that are like so top notch, right? Like Kendra's certification, like the training she gives us, the instructor, so hands-on, so detailed, so informed, because we have this huge background in what we're teaching there. And then we bring in a keynote speaker, it's like Gretchen, and it's like, congratulations, graduates, here's Gretchen Rubin to talk directly to you and tell you what, how great you are. Who is your keynote speaker?
George Mumford.
Leo? Oh, George Mumford. Great.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this guy used to, Michael Jordan loves this guy, and you will too. Here's George Mumford, right? Yeah. And, people paid $350 for that certification. It's because, like, Kendra and I are not, this is not how, training you is not how we want to get rich. Yeah. I mean, I'm not even like rich is like I already said, is not the primary goal. Like,
Yeah.
but I feel super comfortable making a huge profit by doing matchmaking through the coaching directory. It's like it's just a really straightforward win-win. If if coaches, if it's too much of a cut, then the coaches just won't be in the directory, right? So it's like
Yeah.
we know like everyone is like gets gets something good in that. And so then I'm able to build all these other tools for coaches and clients and not feel like pressure to take someone's money. And so heavy mental is sort of in that, where it's like, yeah, I'm charging, because if I don't charge people, I'll just get the wrong people. But I'm not
Yeah.
like, it's not like it makes a few $1,000s a month, but it's not the thing where I'm thinking, oh, this has to make $100,000 a month, right?
Yeah.
And so then I get this the benefit to me is this other thing, which is I feel credible. Like I know when I'm talking to another coach that they know some things that I don't know, but I also know that I know things that they don't know, or I like, and more importantly, I can parse what they're saying because I have hands-on experience. Like when you're
Yeah.
telling me about your tactics, I'm like, I see why that's important. I see why that works. It's much easier for me to talk to you because there's some amount of peer
Yes.
relationship, and that like I don't need to be anyone's, like, especially for a coach, I don't want anyone to think that I know more than them, but I want them to understand like let's talk this out as peers, and because I'm really curious about learning, and I will be able to basically understand what you're telling me because I do have enough experience to get what you're doing. So the problem, the sort of how do I get that experience is I just too much, like one-on-one coaching is
Yeah.
like really time intensive, and
Yeah.
so I don't do a lot of it in a given year. Some, but not a lot of it, and that's
Yeah.
why you anyway, so that's sort of like heavy mental kind of just plays this
Yeah.
research and curiosity role that's really important. But if you're just looking at it being like, that's a weird business decision, it's like, yeah, because it's not a business, it's not the business. The business
It,
is
it's
the
it's
coaching
uh,
directory.
it's actually a research that's paying for itself probably.
Yeah, right.
And
That's it. I
so
like I like for things to pay for themselves. That's important to me. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm the kind of person who really loves recommending things to others. Like, if I
Yeah.
try, so that has been my pattern since the beginning, since my childhood, that
Yeah.
I try something, I'm really curious. I want to experiment
Yeah.
something, like I'll experiment my
Yeah.
sleep. I'll be an early riser, or I'll be, like a night owl and all that stuff. And I
Yeah.
would want to share results with you. And I see that I haven't really shared or recommended this heavy mental training enough so far, but maybe I can put up my referral and start promoting it a little.
Yeah. I mean, that said, it's like the intention is for it to be very powerful. It's just not it's not set up to be a great business, but it is set up to be a really great product. I mean, every year
Yes.
I revise it based on what I learned in the prior year. And that's the kind of the learning and curiosity is like, here's a thing that um, that I can really polish every year in order
Yeah.
to be as good as possible, to always be pushing myself to be better at at creating vehicles for change. But I think it's a
And
like
what's
you should promote it. Yeah.
yeah. So what's one module that you see that impacts the most to anyone who is going through the whole 12-month program?
Self-talk. This surprised me because it was one of the last modules that we developed. So we had people that had been through all of the modules twice already before they said self-talk. And the point of the self-talk module is to train yourself, first of all, to catch your self-talk. I mean, most people aren't really aware of the degree
Yeah.
to which they're muttering to themselves about how much they hate themselves and how they keep failing and whatnot. Um, and then once you've caught yourself, to train yourself in how to think, how to talk differently about yourself. And kind of the problem with negative self-talk is that it ends up limiting you, it ends up paralyzing you, and it ends up
Yeah.
feeling bad.
Yes.
And again, this like kind of related to the no shame. You don't have to feel bad to achieve things. Like there's a fear, because I mean, this is like the immature source of energy for self-improvement is
Yeah.
shame and anger. And so, and then some of those people use that tactic to get to be very successful. But is like, this is one of those, the thing that got you there will not get you here. Like there's a higher level, and that higher level involves removing the shame and the fear and the anger. Those end up being blockers. And so initially they motivate you, but you can't believe that they'll take you all the way. You have to drop. It's like a booster rocket. It's like at some
So
point you drop it off, or you let it fall away. And
yeah. So
so that's,
interestingly, just before you, I invited Paul Cahill from our, Coach.me
yeah,
community. He graduated, I guess, the last cohort as a habit coach, and
yeah,
his coaching was taking ownership. So he calls himself ownership
uh,
coach. And
yeah,
when he needed some beta tester, I was, like one of his clients.
uh,
I worked with him for 6 weeks or so, and uh, taking ownership is, again, basically on a habit level, you have to go on the self talk and everything, right? And
yeah,
how I connect with it with your whatever you have mentioned in your writings and other work is from the 6 gates model. It fits in the identity model. And because I have, like,
uh-huh,
again, I have taken inspiration from your open gates model, and
yeah,
I have like elaborated in my trainings and all that stuff. And whenever I
yeah,
work on the identity part, that identity is, like 1/6 of you, the way you,
yeah,
identify yourself. And the only way to get better at it is the self talk.
yeah. I mean, that's and one of the real tricks of self-improvement is that a lot of it is kind of in your head, right? And the stuff that's in your head is really hard to get at. This is to go back to why advice doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Problem is not lack of information. It's like you can't tell a smoker that smoking is unhealthy and think that that's going to work, right? Like, yeah, they know it's unhealthy. There's other problems. It's not just more information. And so I think we're often really trapped thinking we're blocked by not having the information, but no, we're blocked by so many other things. And yeah, I mean, self-talk can be one of them. And just the feedback we got from people is just being able to see that and like have the tools to reroute it, to change it, to be someone who's your own cheerleader, who like believes in yourself and talk, it it feels so good, but then it leads to good things because it opens up action, and it leads to results. And uh, yeah, people have been really pleased with that of all the modules. Yeah.
So that's, something that, so in my dictionary, I literally hate the word have to. Like, I have to do
Uh-huh.
this. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to do anything. Like, you may have to breathe, you need to breathe, but have to is like a really big limiting sense in itself. And like, if we circle back to the conversation we had about marketing, it comes to the same thing. Like, I have to do marketing versus I want to do marketing because it's my moral
Yeah.
obligation or it's a responsibility.
Right.
And that's empowering in itself. So self-talk is one of them. And have you, by the way, any time like made a reference to all the 12 modules in accordance to your open gate like open 6 gates theory?
Like sort of merge them. um no, I mean, we sort of, sort of the idea behind the open gates is that all 6 gates have to be open in order for someone to succeed. And what's commonly the case is that 2 or 3 are closed. And that's why this like one trick advice
Just
never
Yeah,
doesn't
just to get
work,
in
right?
the context, I just kind of remembered that a lot of people might not be aware of, the open gates model. So can
Right.
you
So
briefly
that's my
describe
like
it?
my that's my quick sort of, the genesis is understanding why you're giving, like why you give someone a good vehicle and it still doesn't work. Well, it's because the vehicle only addressed one of the gates, and the person needed this other one opened at the same time. So the gates model like came from this prior work, Dilt's logical levels, but that was used for something different. I wanted to kind of reframe it for the specific concept that you're often going to have to address 2 or 3 things in order to get someone to get where they're trying to go. And so the gates are your environment, which is the physical things, but we often put your spouse and the people around you as part of your environment. Your habits, like are you able to have consistency around something? The word we use is capacity, but it also involves like skill is one of the most common capacities. Like, do you know how to do this or not? And then the last 3 are technically all variants on belief. There's belief, identity, and mission. Belief is belief about the outside world. Identity is belief about yourself. Mission is belief about what's important. And so, I mean, just like kind of to get at those higher levels, an example of where mission comes into play is every year New Year's resolutions pop up and people say, I want to do X, right? I resolve to do X. And then they fail. Like the media loves to talk about how often they fail. But here's I think by far the most common reason they fail is when you say like, I would like to do an Ironman triathlon. You say that on January 1st. How many hours of training does it take to get to an Ironman? That's like run a marathon, bike 100 miles, swim 3 miles, like all equally, like it's like kind of the athletic equivalent of 3 back-to-back marathons. We're talking about hundreds of hours of work and the pain that comes with it and whatnot. And you might so if you set one of these goals, you don't know for sure how hard it's going to be. You don't know for sure. You don't know for sure what other opportunities are going to come up. So the way that mission then becomes a conflict is that your boss might come to you and say like, hey, it's going to be a lot of work this year, but you can make VP if you take on this project. And then suddenly you're like, I'd way rather be a VP than do an Ironman. Screw the Ironman, right? And so why did you fail there? Well, the mission gate wasn't open. And then you kind of have to, knowing that, you have to decide, well, should I have opened it? Should I have said career is not as important as this? But, like that's what failed there had nothing to do with, was the training plan right? Did you have the right equipment? Did you have access to the right bike, the right pool? None of that stuff was important. What was important is that the work required conflicted with your other goals. And you didn't know that up front. And because you never sorted that out, you ended up failing. And so we talk to people all the time where we've solved one thing. I gave you a free gym membership, but now you walk into that gym and you don't know how to use the equipment. That's a capacity issue. You don't have the skill, right? That it's never that simple, and we needed a way to dig into it. So that's what Open Gates was. And what we find with each module is that people, like different gates are most likely to be closed. So we're not we're like, I always have that in the back of my mind when we go into a module of like, hey, we have to make sure to open these. But it's like the gates is a module for understanding success, or is a method for understanding success and failure. And the heavy mental is a actual set of goals around mental practices. And so the way that you apply those is like each practice, you're like, all right, we got to open all the gates as we go through this module. And so sometimes we talk a lot about it, the open gates in a module, and sometimes like hardly at all,
Got it. And according to you, because you are so much in depth of this self-help industry at the moment, what do you think is like the most underrated skill a person can have for their personal development? It's going to be contextual, I totally understand, but I also understand that you have seen a lot of patterns.
I mean, you have to love the process. You have to love the journey, right? That probably the clearest way this comes up is when I do New Year's resolutions with people. This is a time when I do a lot of one-on-one coaching sessions. They're short, but because they're so focused, short is okay. And so I'll often do like 50 sessions in January, like 50 different people. And the people that are going to fail, which we try to like work them out of, the people that are going to fail have defined their resolution in terms of an outcome. And what really makes it scary, not scary, I mean, look, failure is a strong word, but it's also okay. Like failure is normal.
Yeah.
I failed, I don't know, I had a day Friday where I failed in 15 different things in a row, and I was pretty frustrated with it, but like failure happens, you know? And it's like they've defined an outcome for their New Year's resolution, and they're saying, I need this outcome. It's like this outcome or bust. And, you know, it's like, I'm thinking of kind of a sad one. It's like I need a new job, so I have the money to leave my husband or something. You know, it's like I'm stuck, and there's a like, but I mean, you can kind of make it a little more hyperbolic. It's like I have an unhappy marriage, and so I need to win the lottery. You know, it's like,
I understand.
What is there a different strategy we can use here that actually like puts you in control, puts you in the driver's seat? And so a lot of times when you think that way, you're like, you are playing a lottery, because you're like latching on to these like silver bullet kind of tactics, rather than just say like, listen, to start a business requires 3 years. And in order to be, either I shouldn't, and I should just like be a career person, or I need to take down my cost of living. I need to like really prepare myself to, you know, like to do the work. And I think, you know, in general, like in all things, people that care about the process, they have more fun, they have more success. Every day is more enjoyable. They actually make progress more quickly. And they have just way emotionally a much smoother ride. You know, there's not anxiety about the outcome. There's not as much social comparison. You know,
So
that's the thing.
If I have to put in my language, you know, like the words I would use,
Sure.
were you talking about, you know, like process-based goals versus outcome-based goals?
Yeah. Yes,
Got it. So instead of, you know, instead of having an outcome like I want to lose 10 kgs this year, instead of having an outcome-based goal, it's better to have a process-based goals. Like I want to work out twice a week or thrice a week.
Yeah, I mean, but it's subtle, right? I mean, this is, again, people want things to be simple, right? Like, this is why I'm always saying more work than you want, less than you fear. Well, what prompts the process? What prompts the process is that you have an outcome-based goal, right? Yeah. And so what I'm saying is, like, you have to be attached to the process. Like, the process has to make sense to you. It has to be the primary thing that you're judging yourself on. Did I follow the process? And on a day-to-day basis, you can't be saying, do I have the outcome yet? If every day you wake up and be like, well, have I achieved my outcome? You're going to end up abandoning your process, and you're going to be miserable, and you won't get the outcome. When you wake up, you have to be thinking about the process, and you have to feel good when you followed it. A lot of times, though, the process you've picked is the wrong process because it doesn't get you to this outcome that you want. And so on a regular cadence, which I would say is weekly or monthly or annually, sort of depending, I don't think it needs to be optimized. It's sort of what's sensible. Yeah. You have to look at your process and say, is this the right process? And if it's not, then you change it. But it's like the daily judgment around the outcome has to go, but it doesn't go completely. It just gets scheduled, and so you adjust.
So I have actually a recent experience in this part. I've started one practice so I was in Kendra's build your coaching business, cohort for
Yeah.
2 months.
Yeah.
And I guess it was like in the last 1 or 2 sessions, I decided one protocol in my whole coaching business that I'll have my clients send me a weekly reflection on an email, so
Yeah.
it becomes a thread. Okay.
Yep.
And even if we are not talking on weekly basis, even if like although they are
Yeah.
on they are on connected with me on text and all that stuff, even if we
Yeah.
have coaching sessions after 14 days, they'll still give me a reflection on email and we'll see the progress. And it has worked tremendously. So again, as you mentioned, it just, does it make sense to you? So one of the clients, she was having that, she's not being able to express herself or express her
Yeah.
emotions. So like
Yeah.
exactly a month ago, 17th of April, she sent me a weekly reflection, and she mentioned being able to express my emotions 25%.
Right.
And so again, like just checking in with
Yeah.
herself, like how
Yeah. The
much do you
check in.
feel? And right after 1 month, it was 75%.
Yeah.
And so I see, it's that weekly reflection, or as you're mentioning, like
Yeah.
keeping checkpoints or milestones. It's such a
Right.
subtle and such an impactful activity.
Right. Right. It's important to do both. Right. It just says what is the balance, and
Yeah.
almost always people are overbalanced to the outcome and underbalanced to the process. And so that's why your answer is like, what's the thing? Is like successful people have a healthier balance. And yeah. I mean,
I have an
yeah, good.
no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I actually had a question that I'm just curious about, and just a curious question. Have you seen any patterns around people who are successful in self-help, like improving themselves based on their religious beliefs? Like, are they religious
Ooh.
or atheist or spiritual or not spiritual? Have you seen any patterns in that?
I'm thinking about one of our coaches, Scott Mater, who does financial planning. And he was one of my coaches. I used him before we bought our apartment. I was like,
Okay.
hey, we want to make a mortgage and like we need to get our finances in order. And he was fantastic. And then, I mean, this is not about Scott at first. This is about in just how rough shape our country is in right now. Like we're very, like the US is very split, and one of the common ways that plays out is there's this tension between the religious and the non-religious over political stuff that then like just drips out into everything else. So Scott like very clearly is coming from a religious place and serves a real religious customer base. Like it's literally in his spreadsheet templates include, potentially tithing money, which is, a religious practice. And there's other things like just, it's kind of subtle, some of the language he uses that mostly a Christian, like there's a Christianity to it, right? And
Yeah.
so I've had a hard time suggesting him to people in my kind of like atheist or Jewish like worlds where there's just like some tension there, and they'll be like, oh, he's not for me. And I'm just like, he's the perfect person for you. He's not trying to convert you. There's just a couple lines on the spreadsheet you don't have to like pay any attention to. And also I'm giving the hugest testimonial. I felt so good after working with him. He's fantastic. It's not just like the exercises are good, like he gets people. He will transform your relationship with finances. And I think he's kind of, from like a skill perspective, is our best financial coach on the platform. So good. And I'm, it's kind of funny. It's like, which coach has made me the most money?
Yeah, got it.
Kendra has coached the most clients, but I think Scott made me the most money because he just got my shit together. And so
Yeah, got
I
it.
never thought about it that way, but it's like, like I love Kendra, but my bank account loves Scott. And so I
Yeah,
love this guy, right? And
yeah.
but I have like I have a hard time selling him to like kind of from one-on-one relationships. So it's interesting though, because I grew up in a, basically a atheist family, or at least agnostic for the most part. And so I feel like an outsider, like I feel like an outsider. And
Hmm.
I'm like, having gone through Scott's coaching is probably like the closest I've come. I think like I just sort of noted more community, and
Hmm.
that, when you're in a community, the community exists to help each other. And
Yeah,
so this again, like sales is sorting, not convincing. The community will help you sort, right? Will help you say, well, hey, like the whole community knows they've got a financial coach inside of
yeah,
them. And so everyone who needs that financial coach is going to find their way to
yeah.
to Scott. So that's a very practical answer to what I think you were asking. Like,
Yeah.
does being religious help you be a better coach?
Or
I don't
just
actually
like
know.
improve yourself, like in self help, like if you're trying to improve yourself, does being religious helps you or not? By the way, so what I have seen, because I have studied Stoicism for some part, and it kind of comes natural to me from your writings or your this heavy mental training. I see you as a Stoic as well, and because I've been reading textbook Buddhism for some time, like literally textbook Buddhism for monks, I see so much of Stoicism being overlapped with Buddhism. So whoever tells me that they are Stoic, I kind of believes like they are by default a lot in themselves a Buddhist.
Yeah.
Have you had any chance, like studying Buddhism or any other religious
No.
thing?
In our sort of like on our team is Terry on the Better Humans managing editor, who's the most kind of like uh has the most experience with Buddhism, like had
Okay, okay,
a big Zen practice for a while. And uh, this is, yeah. So for me, not, and what you're making me think is like, how do you get to a point of having a mission? Like for me, kind of like having some sense of like purpose beyond myself. I think I had to create that, and that's where I do wonder with people that have a healthy relationship with spirituality, like grew up with it, which a lot of people grow up in a kind
yeah.
of with a religious background and it's not healthy. We're talking, but some come to it and it is pretty healthy. I mean, it would be nice to have that sense of purpose earlier in life. Like I just sort of backed my way into it because I was sensitive to something being missing. And so I would
Mm.
improve my lot in life and be like, something's still missing, and improve it, something's still missing, and improve it and improve it. And it wasn't really till I had that sense of purpose of like, find something that does good for other people that also fits who you are as a person. And then you'll like, you'll feel stable. And that was, it took me, like I said, till I was 32, till I really, backed my way into having that. I mean, how great would it have been to have that at 22,
Some people have that at like 15. There are a lot of
right?
monks who are like in their teenage
Yeah.
years have.
Yeah.
Okay, just one last personal question.
Yeah.
uh, what has been your personal struggle in terms of self-help, like in terms of something that you have struggled with, or even now that
Uh,
you see patterns repeating?
um, there's two. Um, one is classic. I mean, there's a book that's essentially one of the big management books. What got you there won't get you.
Yeah.
What got you here will not get you there, right? And I thought that's a nice like epiphany when you realize you've been playing to your strengths, but now you've capped out, and your strengths are now your limiters. And just a huge improviser. I'm a creative. It's the creative energy that drives me. And so when I have an insight, like I can be incredibly productive, but without that insight, I'm not really a very good planner or manufacturer of progress. And so as a result, we create lots of things, but then we often don't do the work. And I think kind of the size of the business reflects that. Like that is the limit. The limitation in the business is the who I am. That I will find interesting insights, but and I'll be, to give myself credit, be very good at that. But then, kind of in comparison, the planning that goes into then taking that from interesting to scaling it is, much more difficult for me. Maybe more interesting, because this is more like self-improvement, is when I first was raising money for this company, or like when I first was raising from people I didn't know, I was pitching people on this idea that was interesting and of the moment. It's sort of like applying gamification to self-improvement, essentially. And I put together a top-notch team. Like we were going to do it for mobile apps. Mobile apps were hot. The prettiest mobile app on the market, this app called Path, that people were very inspired by. And I had pulled their head of engineering to be my co-founder. And then as initial backing, I'd gotten Evan Williams right after I left Twitter. And I was like, listen, like we're very early, but like, if you're just judging on team, I've aced it. Like no one is coming to you with a better like kind of prep kind of thing. And we just got turned down over and over and over and over again. And it's funny that they gave me the feedback, or gave feedback through the people that had made the intro. But like, sometimes you get feedback that's not helpful on why they turned you down. And it was weird. Everyone gave the same feedback, is they thought I was too weak to be a CEO. Like they thought I would just like tip over. And like I wasn't able to, I mean, this is like weird pattern matching, but I was just presenting to them very soft. And it freaked me out. And because at first I thought, oh, do I have to be one of these hard chargers? Do I have to like turn myself into this super aggressive person? And if anyone's seen the show Silicon Valley, there's this like section where Erlich Bachman takes over the pitches, and it just like gets like over the top aggressive. And starts like, it's sort of like critiquing people's, like, it's just like like telling people your ideas suck, that art is ugly, and like it just goes so over the top. And I was like, is that who I have to be? And it was my executive coach at the time was like, well, that's not who you are, so that's not who you should try to be. But there's this other option which you might try. And he's the one that led me to meditation. And it's why I've become such a proponent of meditation for performance, because what meditation gave me was a stability. Like I wasn't pushing people. Like I'm not like the kind of person that's really trying to dominate people, but I have such a more stable core of like, I'm not, I guess what they were seeing is that not only was I not asserting myself, but also I could be easily pushed over. And now I think that kind of that mindfulness and a lot of other kind of things around it is like, I know what my principles are. I know what's important to me. Like I'll walk into a room and just generally be much like, there's a strength to me now that wasn't there before. And I think that's probably the biggest transformation of, I think for a CEO and a guy, that combination of being a CEO and a guy, that I have very little interest in dominating people. That I see it sometimes where it's just like people almost have like a subconscious need to get people to do their bidding. That's like what I mean by like the domination. So it's like for them, CEO is a good role. It's like, okay, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And you need to do this. And it's like, they need it. Like, it's not just like, it's good for the business if you do this, but I need you to do this, right? And I very, once it dawned on me that I don't have that a lot, I like really did this inventory. Like, does that feeling ever come up for me? And basically only telemarketers. If a telemarketer gets me on the phone, there's some part of me that just like wants to make them like, I start caring about
Yeah.
being able to impact them, usually in a kind of a negative way. But other than that, I don't care. And so as a result, like I have these things that I think should exist in the world, and I'm trying to kind of facilitate my way towards it. And I just had to find a different way to be a CEO. And it started with just myself being much more stable. And then it's kind of grown a lot into knowing when to assert yourself, and when, I mean, this is a hard thing with being a leader is, when do you just facilitate someone and just see where they take it? And then when do you like really dig in and say like, hey, this has to change, and I'm going, like, there's no choice in it, like we're going to go through it together. And I think that decision is a hard decision point, and then the skills are different for both of them. And that's a lot of the growth in a leader, is being a better delegator of like, hey, here's the guardrails, but within it, do whatever you want. And then also being a better at being effectively assertive, when I need to be. But like literally, I thought I was hot shit, and I walked into these investors and they were telling me I was too weak to be a CEO. And
that's hard. That's heavy.
Usually they just say, we don't like your idea, or we don't think customers will like your idea. Like that would be a very polite thing for them to say. No, they're just like, you are soft. You're too soft for this job. And I remember being really perplexed. I was like, how the fuck do you think I got this team together? By being soft, like it was a very weird moment, and like probably a 6-month period of kind of transformation that I was really stressed by. Yeah.
Amazing.
I did it.
Yeah, you did it. You did it amazingly. And I'm just amazed, so this is something, again, I know that you don't really enjoy when people confess how much, like they admire you, or how much like you have impacted them. But then again,
Sure.
This is a kind of a reminder that among those 100 million lives that you have impacted, one of them has been mine in the last 6 months since I came across Coach Taught Me.
Thank you.
And I'm just so amazed every time I have a conversation with you. So amazed. Thank you so much for these 2 hours that you spent in this conversation. I learned a lot, and a part of why I wanted to do all these interviews is just that I wanted to learn first. Like people come later. I wanted to learn first, and I guess I did learn a lot. And thank you so much. I'm just glad that you said yes to this.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate hearing that, which is really a we, this big team here, helped your life in a way that's meaningful for you. That it feels really good. And, I want you to know, I appreciate you. I really appreciate having you in the community. And, I mean, as I said earlier, I'm sort of rudely interested in who you're going to be in 10 or 15 years, which is probably a lot of pressure to put on you. But yeah, I'm very curious, like where you go, because you have so much good about you. So yeah, I hope that we continue our friendship, and my pleasure to be here, obviously, but thank you for thanking me. I hear that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I hope, and we'll see when we can do this again. For now, it's a wrap up, and we'll see you again in the next guest interview. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.